I found it in a box of old VHS tapes I picked up from a flea market. I hunt for deals there. Sellers are often just looking to unload the crap that sits around off their hands. I buy in bulk, then check the goods, tossing out duds and ensuring items work, are clean and include the necessary pieces, before jacking the price and selling them on eBay. Videotapes are usually a minimal profit at best, but I've found rare items, first releases, Black Diamond Edition Disneys, and rare cover versions that collectors eat up. At any rate, I picked up a large box of tapes that looked to be in great condition for $5, and it wasn't until I got home that I started checking them thoroughly. When I did, I found a standard black video cassette tape missing a box. Normally, these don't interest me because they're usually unsaleable. Secondly, this had no standard label, so it was likely some home movie. What stopped me from tossing it right then and there was the black strip punch label stuck to the back that read 23-2-11 in blocky white raised numbers. I suspected from the dating system it was European, and when it didn't play on my NTSC VCR, that confirmed it. I huffed as I returned to my closet and fetched the European PAL deck. It was only 6 p.m. and I had time to kill, so I popped the tape into my old VHS player and pressed play. The footage was black and white, shot high up from the center of a room where the wall met the ceiling. The camera was pointed down to a thin woman hunched over in a wheelchair. Based on the angle and the stillness of the footage, it was clearly her surveillance feed. The footage was grainy, but I could see the seated woman looking disheveled. Her gray chin-length hair was matted and messy, and she appeared to be dressed in a filthy hospital gown. The way the woman was positioned looked still and unnatural. I quickly realized her wrists and ankles were bound to the wheelchair with straps. Both the walls and floors were padded with quilted square cushioning, and the door behind her had a slot in it, resembling something out of a mental hospital or maximum security prison. Just a second after the recording began, the bound woman raised her head and looked directly into the camera. I immediately felt a growing sense of dread as the intense stare of the woman burned into my retinas. Some primal part of my brain awoke and implored me to get away. But I just watched as curiosity and fear mingled into an all-encompassing wave of building anxiety. The woman just sat in her chair staring, but I felt my mouth begin to dry and my breath felt abrasive. My sinuses burned, and soon I felt the patter of liquid onto my lap from my nose, but I couldn't turn away from the screen. I heard a rapid tapping, and it took a few seconds of trying to understand the sound before I realized it was the chattering of my teeth. I was shivering, and my arms and legs trembled as I watched the woman on the screen tilt her head to one side, as if observing me through the screen itself. That feeling of impending danger heightened, and I wanted to turn it off at that point, but I just kept watching as the woman began fidgeting in the wheelchair's restraints. She was becoming progressively more agitated, thrashing until the chair began to rock between the two large wheels. After a few minutes, she opened her mouth and began to scream. The tape was silent, but I swear I could hear her faintly, though not through the speakers. It was like she was screaming from inside my head, small and muffled, from deep under the folds of my brain. I felt my lips crack in stinging slivers. I began to wonder just how long I'd been watching the tape, but I was enthralled by the unsettling footage, unable to stop it. Eventually, the door to her room opened, and two large men in white uniforms entered her padded cell. One was shorter with a shaved head and stocky build, the other taller with a slender frame and a face framed by dark bangs. The tall man began holding his head in apparent agony, screaming and then dropping to his knees on the padded floor. He remained there as the shorter guy struggled to remove the cat from a syringe. I only then noticed the subtle relief my own body experienced. It was as if whatever had taken hold of me, the intense dryness in my throat, a pulsing headache and the palpable dread, had redirected its focus. The man on his knees began to shiver, and soon enough, his nose streamed down a dark rivulet of blood. The shorter character with a shaved head had uncapped the syringe but was clearly struggling. His right arm drew it closer, needle first, towards his own eye. His left was gripping his other wrist, struggling to redirect its course. I watched in horror as the tip punctured his eye, just a centimeter or so. He seemed to regain control and quickly removed it. He then stabbed the needle into the bound woman's shoulder and pressed the plunger fully down. The feeling of intensity seemed to wash away from both the on-screen characters and myself. Euphoria set in as my previous state of dry, labored breathing and chest pains left me. The two workers at the hospital, prison, or other such facility both seemed to recover as well, the one helping his cohort to his feet. The two men left the room, securing the sturdy door behind them. I watched for a few minutes as the woman in the wheelchair slouched and then dropped her head. She looked to be asleep, or at least heavily sedated. She remained that way for a good minute or two after the men had cleared out. I watched her slack body for a few more minutes in utter fascination, until the tape reached the end and stopped with an audible click. The intense anxiety dissipated completely, and I only then realized how absolutely drastic the shift in my own state had been. I felt as if I'd been desiccated, every ounce of water in me sucked out, yet my nose was wet and dribbling down my chin. When I wiped it instinctively with the back of my hand, I saw that it was blood. There were dark red spots on my lap as well from where it had poured during the viewing of the tape. I stood up, and my muscles ached and groaned. I glanced at my phone for the time, and stopped in my place, my jaw agape. The time read 6, the same time I started watching the tape. I was about to chalk it up to a glitch when it changed to 6:01. There was no shadow of a doubt in my mind that I'd watched the tape for a good 10 minutes or so. I stretched my aching muscles and walked to the bathroom to clean my bloody nose. I downed a quart or so of water, dying of thirst. I waited a few days before even considering watching the tape again. When I did, everything that secured my knowledge of the world I knew seemed to crumble. It was a sunny afternoon a week later when I built up the courage to watch the tape again. I just felt the urge to confirm what I experienced was real and not some effect of delayed food poisoning, an allergic reaction, or some other bizarre coincidence. I popped the cassette tape and rewound it, which took only seconds. When I stopped, I pressed play. The woman bound to a wheelchair once again appeared on the screen, and a foreboding feeling of dread began to simmer inside of me. Something was different though. The woman was askew, facing the camera still, but at a slightly different angle as if the wheelchair had shifted. On the floor behind her, black spots where the guard had yet to collapse were on the floor. It was as if the tape was showing a continuation of what had previously been recorded. My palms began to sweat, and my throat dried like an arid desert as I watched the woman staring into the camera once again. Her hair was shorter, trimmed down unevenly as if someone had hastily clipped the matted patches and knots. I knew it was impossible, but the tape appeared to be now showing a different recording altogether. Then, she looked up at the camera and I felt it again. My throat swelled and dried, and my breath began to burn. Her dark eyes locked onto mine through the screen. I felt the spasm in my arms and legs as they began to shiver. My sinuses flooded, and my nose began dribbling out a thin stream of blood, which dripped rhythmically onto my shirt. I watched, unable to peel my eyes away, as the woman in the wheelchair yanked her spindly arms, snapping her restraints. I let out a yell as she stood up fully, revealing her filthy hospital gown. She walked slowly toward the camera, and her wrinkles came into view through the fuzzy tape. Her features looked young, but her pale skin was wrinkled and speckled with burst capillaries. Her eyes were milky with cataracts and looked wild with excitement. She drew closer, getting larger on screen until her face was clear, and she mouthed something I swear I could hear inside of my head. She spoke the words, "Je te vois," and a hint of a smile crept onto her face before the tape clicked to a stop. I haven't yet worked up the nerve to watch it again. I bled a significant amount during the second viewing, and I'm frankly scared of the videotape. I attempted to make a copy, but it showed nothing but a black screen when I played it. I even tried recording it with my phone, but the TV screen in the video was black aside from a flicker. What I just can't shake are those words she'd spoken that resonated from deep within my skull. They're French, and they translate to, "I see you." My buddy Steve was a genius at making money without doing anything. At one point, he was enrolled in 12 different clinical trials at the same time. Some of these were for drugs that would have had bad interactions, but it didn't matter to Steve, because he never actually took the drugs. He did it like they do in the movies, and just slipped them under his tongue and then spat them into his hand when the doc was turned away. Other trials were for new therapeutic approaches and things like that, but those are no problem for Steve either. At most, he had to lie, literally and metaphorically, on somebody's couch for an hour each week, then collect his check on the way out. But eventually they caught on, and Steve was put on some kind of list. There was a nationwide ban on Steve, so they couldn't participate in any more trials sponsored by universities or private drug companies, which essentially precluded him from that easy money. But Steve found a workaround. Not all experiments are above board and sanctioned by the FDA or whatever. There is, in fact, a hidden world of people testing things out in their garages, streamlining the whole process without having to worry about pesky and expensive regulations. One of Steve's friends gave him a link to a forum on the dark web, and after that, he was in the pipeline. The thing about these experiments is that if they were for, say, a new drug, they didn't trust you to just swallow the pill. You had to open your mouth and lift your tongue. You had to actually take the thing, because these people weren't fucking around. But boy, did they pay. One morning, I was awakened by an insanely loud banging at my apartment door. "Who's that?" moaned my girlfriend, Sophia. I looked at the clock with blurry eyes. It was 5:55 a.m. "Open up, dude," shouted Steve from the hallway. "Oh, fuck him," said Sophia. "He could be in trouble," I said, shooting out of bed full of adrenaline. I answered the door in my boxers, and there was Steve, bouncing up and down, his pupils each the size of the full moon. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm awesome," said Steve. "Holy shit, dude. This stuff. They gave me $1,000 to take one fucking pill, and it rules so much. It feels so good. Oh my god, Jay. Oh my god." My head hurt as I tried to piece together a thought. "So you're high, and you came to tell me that you got paid a lot of money to get high." I felt a surge of rage welling up deep inside of me. Yeah, I mean, no. Look, man, you're my best friend. I love you. I love you so much. I want to... No, listen. I came here because, look, there's money. A lot of money for me and you. $20,000 for a video game. To play a video game or something. Dude, 20 grand to play a video game for a few hours. Look, I'm just telling you this because I love you. You don't need to take drugs or anything. Just some virtual reality stuff for a few hours, and boom, 20 grand in your pocket like that. The flood of rage died down as I tried to make sense of what Steve was saying. I couldn't. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Why are you here before the crack of dawn?" Sophia's pissed, and so am I, really. No, said Steve, with a horrified look on his face. "I want you to be happy. Sophia too. Look. You still have that Tor browser I set up for you and all that?" I guess so." Good, listen, look." Steve jammed his hand in his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. "Look, just type this in and you'll see. Easy money, okay? $20,000. You can finally buy that engagement ring that you..." I reached out and smacked Steve across the side of his head. "Jesus Christ, dude, keep it down, yeah?" Steve looked shocked and hurt for a moment before the realization dawned on him. "Aw, shit. My bad, man. My bad. I'm sorry. I wish I could delete it. I wish I could just delete it. Listen, are you going to check this out or what?" He held out the crumpled piece of paper to me. I took it and shrugged. "I'll check it out, Steve, but that's it for now. Why don't you head home and sleep this one off, yeah?" "Yeah," said Steve, nodding his head like crazy. "Yeah, check it out. I'll go sleep it off." I started to close the door, but he stuck his foot in just before it closed. Dude." "Yeah." "Can I use your bathroom?" I opened the door and sighed as he rushed into the bathroom and started puking his guts out. Steve received a ban from our apartment after that, but we stayed in touch. He would text me every few hours, asking if I'd checked out the advertisement for the video game trial yet. The truth was that I had checked it out as soon as he left that morning, but I was undecided. On the one hand, The $20,000 sure was intriguing. That was almost half as much as I made a year, more than half after taxes. And I had a feeling that this wasn't the sort of gig where they took taxes out. I'd be able to do a lot with the money. Take Sophia out for all kinds of dinners, maybe take a vacation and travel somewhere interesting. The kinds of things we always wanted to do, but never could afford to. Then too, yes, there was the engagement ring. Sophia would say yes either way, even if I presented her with some rolled up aluminum foil. But I wanted it to be special, but I couldn't afford to make it special. On the other hand, well, the whole thing was sketchy as fuck. Who pays some Joe off the street $20,000 to test out a video game? And why go through such shady channels to set the thing up? I knew from the start that nothing good could come from it. I knew that, but I did it anyway. Alright, I wrote in a text to Steve. I'm in for the video game thing. My man, we're gonna be swimming in fucking caviar, my dude. Steve and I drove to the address together. It was, strangely, a respectable looking office building. We went up to the entrance and looked at the map of the building. There was a lawyer in there, a counselor, an accountant, and so forth. Shit, said Steve. Which fucking office is it? On cue, his phone buzzed. Oh, he said, the basement. The basement? I asked. Not for real. The basement? I don't know about this, man. Come on, dude. $20,000. And in such a nice building, too. I'm used to going to crazy people's garages and swallowing God knows what. This is gonna be cake. I nodded, but as we walked to the elevator, my sense of unease grew larger and larger until it was screaming at me. Turn around. Whatever this is, it's bad. It's just a video game, I muttered. What's that? Asked Steve. I snapped out of it. I said, let's go play this dumb video game and get paid. That's the attitude, said Steve, grinning, as the elevator door slid closed behind me. We rode down to the basement as I tried to calm myself down. It's a video game. In the basement of a respectable office. Probably they could only afford to rent the basement. I shut myself up before I could ask. They can only afford to rent the basement, but they're paying you $20,000 each? When we reached the bottom, the door slid open, and the first thing I saw was a man and a woman sitting at a plastic work table in the middle of a large room. Other than that, it looked like a standard basement with equipment like boilers and hot water heaters, and exposed wiring and concrete floors. Welcome, said the woman. Steven and Jason, is that right? That's us, said Steve, stepping off the elevator. I followed behind and watched as the woman wrote something on her clipboard. That's fantastic, said the man. Right on time. Well, a few minutes late, but that's okay. He laughed. It happens, said the woman, smiling. People have things to do, and we respect that here. That's why we're going to get right down to business. Or, nearly so. First, we need you to sign the contract. The woman held out 2 clipboards, and we each took one. Before I looked at it, I took a moment to note that my unease had not subsided, despite the surface friendliness of the man and the woman. Somehow, that made it even more bizarre, that they were just sitting there, so poised amongst the plumbing pipes running overhead, ready to offer us a lot of money to play a video game. Where do we play the game? I asked, looking around. I didn't see a TV or anything. Up here, said the man, tapping his head. I started, but Steve gave me a nudge. They'll tell us what to do, he said. Just sign the contract, dude. He scrawled some information into a few boxes and dashed off a signature while I read mine more closely. The participant agrees not to seek compensation beyond the predetermined amount. In this case, the predetermined amount is $20,000 US for participating in one trial game of Total Control, TC. The makers of TC and the administrators of the trial hereby relieve themselves of all liability for any injuries sustained during gameplay, with the express agreement of the participant. Injuries? I asked. What kind of game is this? The woman smiled. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to tell you anything about the game until you sign the contract. After that, you'll know all about it. In the event that the participant is unable to collect the predetermined amount at the end of the game, the makers of TC will transfer the funds to a person of the participant's choosing. The following box is for the participant to note the name and address of the next of kin. So you're saying that if we die, you'll give the money to somebody that we choose? I asked. Is that right? That's right, said the man. If we die while playing your game, I stressed. I turned to Steve. Dude, this is nuts. Steve shrugged. It's a lot of money, dude. Take it or leave it. I'm taking it. I tried to convince myself to leave it, but then I thought about going to Europe with Sophia. I wrote her name in the next of kin box and then signed the form. I handed the clipboard back to the woman, who scanned it over. Fantastic, she said. Now will you tell us what this game is? I asked. We'll do better than that, said the man. He reached down into a cardboard box on the ground and pulled out what looked to be 2 headsets. We'll show you the game. Please, gentlemen, put these devices on your heads and prepare for an experience unlike any other. Or so we hope, he added, laughing. Steve didn't hesitate to put the thing on his head. It looked like the front half of a helmet with an elastic band securing it in place and a pair of glasses attached to the helmet. I don't see anything, said Steve. It's a 2-player game, said the man, nodding to me. I took a deep breath. It's just a fucking game. I put the headset on and looked through the glasses. Everything looked the same, except it had a slight yellow tint. I watched as the man reached into the box again and brought out 2 video game controllers. He handed one to the woman, and then they each pushed a button. I heard Steve scream a split second before I heard the hiss of some hydraulic mechanism being engaged just above my ear. Then, I felt the most intense pain in my life. It felt like something was being jabbed directly into my fucking brain. And that's exactly what was happening. A trickle of blood rolled down the side of my head as my brain lit up with pain. Then, I was out of it. When I woke up, I was strapped to a chair, sitting opposite the man and woman behind their table, and next to Steve. There was only a dull ache in my head now, but it didn't take long for me to burst into full-on panic. Ah, good, said the woman. You're both awake. She stood up calmly, walked over, and undid my straps. What is this? I gasped. What the fuck is this? It's an experiment, said the man. Don't worry, we've ironed out some kinks since the last time we tried it. What experiment? I asked, standing up on wobbly legs. What are you gonna do to us? The woman went to work unstrapping Steve. We've implanted a device in your head, she explained. It allows us to control your physical movements. Or so we hope. Steve rubbed his head. What the fuck? You're gonna pay us, right? Of course, said the man. He reached into his cardboard box and pulled out 2 thick envelopes. I hope cash is okay. He tossed them across the table to our feet. Steve bent down and tore his open. I saw the cash inside. Okay, he said. That's worth it for a little headache, I guess. Alright, so you've implanted these devices in our brains. Okay, so can we leave now? You can try, said the man. But you won't be able to if we don't want you to, said the woman. And we don't want you to, said the man. Not until you fight to the death, said the woman. I jumped to my feet and tried to slow down my breathing. Come on, man, I said to Steve. That's enough of this. I bent down to pick up my envelope and then started walking toward the elevator. Thanks for the money, guys, said Steve. Then he followed behind me and pushed the button. The light came on and we waited for the elevator to come. Then, I reached my fist back and swung it as hard as I could at Steve's jaw. It connected with a loud crack, and I saw a spray of blood leave his mouth. What the fuck? Groaned Steve, rubbing his jaw. I felt dizzy. What the fuck indeed? Why had I just socked my best friend in the face for no reason? Dude, I'm so sorry. I have no idea why I did that. Steve spit out some blood on the basement floor. Forget it. Let's just get the fuck out of here. The elevator door dinged. Sounds good to me, I said as the door slid open. I went to step in when suddenly I felt a hand grab my shoulder and roughly spin me around. It was Steve. He had a confused look on his face as he grabbed my neck with both hands and started to choke me. My nerves exploded in panic as I struggled to breathe. I felt myself bring my knee up into Steve's balls, He let go of my neck and then hunched over. "What's happening?" he gasped. I brought my elbow down on his back, and he screamed out in pain. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know." I looked over at the man and the woman still seated behind their plastic work table. They were each holding their game controllers and smiling. "What the fuck is happening?" The woman pushed a button, and suddenly Steve lunged at me, driving his shoulder into my gut. We hit the ground together, my elbow taking the brunt of the impact. "I'm so sorry," cried Steve. "I can't stop." I reached up and grabbed Steve's face in my hand. I didn't want to. I tried to make myself stop, but I couldn't. I began squeezing my thumb and middle finger, which were spread out and gripped into the spot behind his eye sockets. "Stop this," I shouted. Steve sunk into my palm with his teeth and tore a chunk of my flesh off. I felt a searing pain and a deep fear as he spit my skin onto the ground. I tried to will myself to stay still, but I couldn't. I punched him in the eye. When his head jerked back from the blow, I pushed against his chest and twisted around, so that now I was on top of him. I took a clump of his hair in my hand and began smashing his head against the concrete floor, again and again and again. I was crying. I was begging myself to stop. I was begging the man and the woman to stop whatever they were doing. I was begging Steve to forgive me, as his head hit the floor with a thunk that sounded wetter and wetter each time, as blood gushed and sprayed everywhere. "Okay," said the man after a while. "That's enough. My player's dead now." I heard the woman laugh. "I told you I'd win." Suddenly, I was in control of my own movements again. I set Steve's head gently on the ground and knelt next to him, sobbing. "What have I done? What did you make me do?" Now, said the man, standing up. "It's not all bad news." He walked over and picked up the envelope of cash that Steve had dropped. He did name you as his next of kin, so you've just made $40,000. I looked up at him with blurry eyes. "You fucking monsters," I said, standing up. "I'll fucking kill you." I ran at him full of rage, with my arms outstretched, but when I got to him, I slowed down, spread my arms wider, and embraced him in a friendly hug. My mind screamed in terror and rage, but my body wouldn't respond. "We control you now," said the woman. "We're happy to let it go at this. You served our purpose as a beta tester. We'll let you get in that elevator with your money, and you'll never hear from us again. If you honor your contract. You remember your contract, don't you? There's a copy of it in your back pocket. There's one bit that you should pay careful attention to. The bit about how you are never to tell anyone anything close to what happened here. Don't worry about coming up with an explanation for your friends. We'll take care of that. All that you have to do about all of this is literally nothing. Don't say a word. You're probably best forgetting it ever happened." "There's a hose in the corner," said the man. "Clean yourself up, take your money, and leave." I did just that. I just wasn't sure if I was the one doing it. After I killed Steve, my life fell apart. Of course it did. I knew that I wasn't in control of my actions at the time, but that didn't help at all. I'd watched the life leave his eyes, and I'd gone on smashing his head against the concrete again and again, well after he was dead. I had nightmares about it every night, and the worst part was that I couldn't tell anybody about it. What was I supposed to do? Turn myself into the police? For murdering my best friend literally against my will? How would that help anything? I wanted to tell Sophia. I wanted to tell her so badly, but I couldn't. Those people had put the fear in me. We started doing fancy things together with the money, like going out to eat, but it was no good. It was like a part of me had died when Steve had died, when I had bashed the life out of him. Sophia didn't want fancy dinners and all the things that money can buy. She wanted me. But I wasn't there anymore. I started drinking more and more. I considered suicide. Not seriously at first, but as time went by, it seemed more and more like a viable option. Anything to stop the never-ending guilt and grief. For her part, Sophia stuck with me for longer than anyone could have hoped for. But finally, it got to be too much. It was clear that things were over well before the night we laid in bed together after yet another failed attempt at making love. "I can't do this anymore, Jay," she said. "I love you, but something changed after Steve's accident. I know that he was your best friend and it tore your heart out. But what about life? What about me? You didn't die. I didn't die. We're still here. And I can't do it anymore. It's been 3 months and I don't think I've heard you laugh once. I'm not blaming you. And I can't tell you how much I wanted to be able to do this. It's my failure, really. But like I said, we're still alive. And I want to live while I can. And I want you to live too." I clenched my jaw, trying to fight back the tears. I tried to think rationally. If you really love her, you'll tell her to fuck off. But I didn't. "I have to tell you something," I said. Then, as my soul screamed in horror, I smothered her with a pillow. I've been in bed with Sophia's corpse for 2 days now. Yesterday, I got this text. "We have gathered all the data we need. Your contract has been fulfilled. Your unit has been deactivated. We thank you for your participation and wish you the best of luck." I don't know what to do. I'll start here by typing this out. My name is Jay, and I killed my best friend and the love of my life. But I wasn't in control of my body at the time. Where do I go from here? Back when I lived in the rural Midwest, about 10 years ago, I lived in a house right off of the highway. My house was right between one town and another, almost right on the county line. Our house had this big circle driveway. If you drove in the driveway, you would be going straight toward our barn. If you curved right, you could pull into our garage. If you went past the garage, you could circle around, in front of the house, and pull back out to where you started. Our house had 2 large double doors in the front, which we rarely used. We always used the door that was inside the garage. One night, it was very late, and my doorbell rang. My husband, my 3-year-old daughter, and I were all asleep. It woke me up, and I thought maybe I was dreaming, but it rang again. I woke my husband up. He thought I was hearing things, until it rang for a 3rd time. It was very dark outside, but we have a dusk to dawn light, so most of our driveway is pretty lit up. My husband gets up and I follow him. He decides he's going to open the door. I want to call the cops, but because we live on the county line, we know it's going to be a while before they can get there. He opens the door to a girl, maybe in her early 20s. She looks normal except for the fact that she's standing at my door in the middle of the night. I look past her, and her car is pulled into my driveway just off of the road. Not up to the house, not around the circle. She says she needs to use our phone. She says her car battery died or something. She's not sure, but it won't start. I told my husband, no fucking way, this is how horror movies start, and we offered to call the cops. She asks over and over, but I'm not letting her in. We tell her we'll call, and she kind of stomps off. We watch her walk back to the car, maybe 50 feet. I can see her car. I can see her. I call the cops. They say they'll be there as soon as they can, about 15 minutes. They don't sound very concerned, and at this point, I'm not really either. I mean, it's just a girl. She probably does have a dead battery. She opens the trunk, and no lights come on. She's rummaging around. Then, the driver's side door opens. Out steps a guy. Then the back passenger. Out steps another guy. They all rummage around the trunk. No lights are on. I can't hear anything. I can't hear them talking, and I can't tell what they're doing. And then they all get back in the car. At this point, maybe 5 minutes have gone by, and I'm silently praying that the sheriff puts his foot on the gas and gets here quickly. But I know it's going to be another 10 minutes or so. They just sit there, in the car with the lights off, not moving. I can't see them when they're in the car, but I know they're there. I know they didn't get out of the car and walk past the house. I would have seen them. I think I see the driver light a smoke. I'm not sure. Then, I see something. Someone walking toward the car from the right, coming from the direction of the barn. It's a man. I have no idea who this man is. We don't have a neighbor for at least a mile, and he's coming from the back of my property, which ends in a creek. He walks under the dusk to dawn light straight to the car. He doesn't look at the house. He just walks to the car and gets in the back. The car starts up, and they slowly back out of my driveway and head north. The cops arrive about 10 minutes later, and at this point I'm freaking out. They search around but can't find anything. They ask us if we got a license plate, but they park too far away. They tell us to call if they come back. My husband goes and gets his shotgun from the shop, and we try to go back to sleep. They never came back. I don't know who those people were, and I don't know what they wanted. My wife and I are both very sensitive to energies that most people around us are not. We've each had our share of far-out paranormal encounters separately, and since we've been together, it's been one hell of a ride that just seems to get more far out as time goes on. Backstory: while we were building our house, we were living in a large wall tent on our property. It was pretty large for a tent, almost 400 square feet, so you could easily walk around in it. It had our full-size bed on a bed frame in there, a kitchen area, and a table with several chairs. It even had a canvas drop cloth as a floor, so we weren't walking around in the dirt. And I had the sides folded in and weighted down all the way around, as well as staked down to keep any critters out. Apart from a couple of flies and 1 or 2 spiders, it did the trick. At the time, I was doing freelance handyman and repair work during the day and building our house in the evenings. And on the day of this incident, I was finishing up work on a house that had bad juju written all over it. I could feel the negative energy from the curb the first time I pulled up to the house to meet the owner. And walking through the door, the feeling intensified. But it wasn't absolutely overwhelming. And what can I say? We really needed the money. I had lost part of a thumb a week earlier in an accident working on the house, and had an upcoming surgery to get it stitched up, and to get the bone properly covered, and we didn't have insurance. Money was more than tight. Besides, I felt comfortable in my abilities to keep the negative energy at bay while I did whatever work had to be done, and get the hell out of there. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. After a couple of weeks of working there, by the way, no one was living there at the time, the regular things that you would expect to happen in a high energy place happened. Lights flipping back on right after I turned them off, doors slamming shut behind me while I'm walking down the hallway, or opening for me as I'm reaching for them. The kind of stuff that's pretty much just meant to get a rise out of you. And the more I played it cool, the more intense it got. Eventually, I get to the last day, when, over the phone, the owner hinted at stiffing me for the bill, and I was packing up all my gear. I guess it was evident that I wasn't planning on coming back, because the activity in the house was extremely low, virtually non-existent, except for the same dense negative energy that was always there. But now more than ever, I felt like I was being watched. Not just watched, but stared at. Like something was focusing on me with everything it had. Everything up until this point had been weird, but it was only your everyday kind of weird. The kind of weird that people who don't want to accept it can still somehow find logical excuses for. They'll say there was a draft or faulty wiring, really big mice in the walls, etc. The next thing that happened was the first thing in the house that genuinely spooked me. As I walked through the living room to the front door to leave for good, tool bucket in hand, I passed the only hallway in the house on my right. As I looked down the hallway to double check that I had turned off all the lights, I saw something that I didn't want to believe. At the end of the hallway, about 20 to 30 feet away from me, sat a huge black dog. Its head was following me as I walked past the hallway. When I say huge, I mean massive, like my head would have fit inside of its mouth. My prior experience with manifestations like that have taught me to give it as little energy as possible, and that you're better off acting like you hadn't noticed it. So, I continued to walk calmly to the front door, even though every hair on my body was standing on end, and my adrenaline was racing. I stopped at the front door inside the house, turned around, and addressed the house and everything within it, stating that as I left the house, nothing was welcome to follow me. I drove home, and that was that. I didn't tell my wife because I didn't want to worry her. We had enough going on at the time without bringing up things that I felt had already been addressed. So, fast forward to later that night. My wife and I are fast asleep in bed. I'm torn out of sleep by my wife's terrified gasp, and being in a canvas tent in the middle of nowhere, I was already on edge. In the first split second of being awake, I see my wife sitting upright in our bed, still in the process of gasping, while our dog, who had been sleeping next to her, ran, barking and snarling like a lunatic, and jumped off the base of the bed, between us and the door. I still hadn't seen what was terrifying them, but leapt out of the bed while shouting at our dog, "Bed!" He's a little guy, and his job was to let me know about the boogeyman, not to fight it himself, and landed between the dog and the entrance to our tent. The entrance, which was not only still zipped up and buckled up tight, but staked to the ground in multiple places as well, as I did every night. As my feet hit the ground, I stood almost face to face with a massive black dog. It was sitting in front of the doorway, and as I landed and looked it in the eyes, I was filled with nothing short of absolute rage. I love my wife with all my heart, and here was something dangerous that wasn't welcome in our home, watching us sleep. Immediately, I stepped forward and shouted at it, deep and loud, "Get out!" As I did so, this thing stands up and steps toward me, and I shout again, this time clapping my hands together as hard and loud as I can, without stepping forward again. Again, this unbelievably massive dog, which is almost face to face with me height-wise, steps forward. At this point, we're maybe 4 feet away from each other. It hasn't ran off, and it's clear that this thing could easily kill us both if I let it. I lunge forward and come down as hard as I can with my right fist, aiming to kill it, aiming between the snout and right below the eyes. And just like that, ready to get torn to ribbons by this thing, I go right through it, and it's just gone. I'm completely shocked and spin around to see if, somehow, it slipped past me to my wife and dog. Then, I unzip the very bottom of the front of our home, rip the stakes from the earth, and run a few steps out into the night, looking every direction for the thing. The moon is out, and I've got excellent night vision, but I can't see any sign of it, and nothing is moving. I can't smell it, nothing. So, after a minute, I run back inside to make sure my wife is okay. She's still sitting straight up in bed, eyes wide open, but she's okay, and the dog is tense as hell. I finally felt my thumb screaming in pain and pouring blood at this point. The bone was still exposed, waiting for surgery, and the heavy bandage had gotten knocked off at some point. My heart rate is calming down, and I asked her what she saw while I'm trying to stop the bleeding again with paper towels. Now, we're both extremely logical people, despite all the weird shit we've seen. No matter how much paranormal stuff you've seen, you can't fall down the rabbit hole, and it's still safe to assume that the vast majority of weird shit you experience can be explained logically, and that's the way we both view it. But when I asked her what she saw, and before telling her what I saw, she looked me dead in the eyes and said that it looked like a werewolf was sitting in our doorway watching us. I don't believe in werewolves, but I know for a fact that we both, individually, identified an unbelievably massive canine in our home, 10 feet from the foot of our bed, and we both saw it vanish in the thin air. I know our dog saw something that he identified as a threat. There were no tracks anywhere around our tent the next morning. I looked as soon as the sun came up. Even if there had been tracks, we live in the middle of nowhere, in the desert. There aren't any wolves. There are occasionally stray dogs and coyotes, but everything is on the small side. The only description that has consistently came to my mind since then has been a hellhound, but I can't seem to find any similar stories online. Anyone with any thoughts, feel free to chime in, and I'll answer any questions I can. It's idyllic. People crave it. To live beside the seaside is considered a privilege, some sort of picturesque life that those living in cities can only dream of. That's the sort of thing they told me, and my friends online. The part of growing up by the sea that others don't tell you about, or for the most part even consider, is the loneliness. The pool of friends and love interests is that much smaller, especially in the tiny ocean towns. It's what drove me to a life of lurking the darkest corners of the internet, trying to satiate my need for some kind of human connection. I'm a horror fan. I spent hours lurking the sub and a million other dark and interesting forums on the web. I won't name the places I found my friends. I wouldn't want others to go digging and end up in the sort of predicament I find myself in. After all, I'm sure most of you are just like me, merely looking for a scare before bed, and someone to talk to. The friends that I made online were hardcore, obsessed with urban legends, unsolved mysteries, and finding the real, scariest shit that's been posted online. I suppose I was no different, not at first anyway. I reveled in the grainy video footage, and my favorites were the tales that you couldn't quite disprove. I wasn't alarmed about the obsessive direction my friends were taking until a guy with the username Loiters with Intent started posting to the forum. He got involved in the Discord and became a big player amongst the group. He claimed to have spent years proving urban legends real. As skeptical as the group could be, we all desperately wanted proof, for even one of the mysteries that we had obsessed over to be real would have vindicated all the hours that we spent discussing them. Loiters with Intent was the kind of guy that no one wanted to admit they were a little scared of. Whilst the others were sharing memes and John Bonet theories, he was sending us freaky videos from the depths of the web, with gore and jumps that looked perfectly realistic. When he sent us instructions to access one of the websites for a video, I knew that it had to be some deep web shit. Still, it didn't squash my curiosity. I'd always been fascinated by the idea of surfing the deep web, browsing the dark and mysterious corners of the internet to my heart's content. It had some type of sick allure, and I'd often found myself looking for the worst things that people have seen on the dark net threads over the years. I followed the instructions to the letter and was met with a mostly black webpage with a tiny video box in the middle. In red letters above the extra small video box were the words, "A Birth of a Legend." I wondered if Loiters with Intent had made it himself in some poor attempt to scare us all. I wasn't very technological. I had only been able to access the website with instruction, so I had no idea how difficult or easy that might be. I pressed play, and the first thing I was confronted with was a beautiful girl. Man, she looked terrified, but she was so stunning. Long wavy dark hair and deep brown eyes lured me in, but the terror that glazed them made me feel wholly uncomfortable. If the girl was acting, then she deserved an Academy Award before she even said a word. The cameraman backed up a bit, and I could see that the girl was stood on an unfamiliar, empty beach.
"Run, bitch,"
came a voice from behind the camera, a mocking and gloating man. "Please, it hurts so bad," the girl replied, voice cracking as she spoke directly into his camera. "If anyone's watching, please help me." She wore a tattered white dress. the sort of dress a girl like that would wear to a fancy party. But it looked like she had been away from the party for quite some time. There were rips, exposing bruises that covered her whole beautiful body. My heart broke as she attempted to run across the sand, tripping and stumbling as the cameraman laughed and mocked her. The beach in the video was huge, a vast expanse with no sign of reaching a town or land. As the camera panned round, I could see that the sand stretched for miles. If the guy wanted to hurt her, then she had no chance of escaping. He was allowing her a head start, purely for his own amusement. The sick fuck. Discord notifications pinged my phone on the desk as the others made their way through the video. What the fuck, man? What is this, Lorders? Is this shit real? Ha, nice try, but that's definitely fake. I remained fixated on the video. The girl trying to run and hide in the open landscape, with a choice between miles of sand or the thick barrier of rock pools that met the water. It was no choice at all, really. In her position, I probably would have just laid down and accepted my fate. The camera turned around and faced the cameraman, fully clad in a balaclava. He lifted the mask just enough so the viewers could see his ravenous smile.
Well done to the highest bidder. This is for you.
He walked toward the girl, his steps making a lot more progress than her frantic, panicked running. He wiggled a screwdriver in front of the camera as he approached her, and she fell to the ground. Watching the video from the cameraman's perspective felt voyeuristic, like it was me, standing above the poor woman with a weapon, like I'd taken her there. I winced hard as he brought the screwdriver down with force and plunged it into her leg, and then her arm, and then her other leg. He hit every non-deadly area possible before finally sticking it deep into her eye, hovering as it forced its way out of the socket like jelly, and the tip of the metal implement presumably reached her brain. He dragged and threw her body into a deep rock pool and turned the camera to face him one more time, balaclava still rolled up above his mouth.
I hope you bottom feeders like that. Time for some real bottom feeders to enjoy her now.
He laughed evilly, relishing what he'd done. I felt tears roll down my cheeks. It was too realistic. I felt responsible for not saving her, for her death, for making my way through an entire snuff film. I felt dirty. Then the video took a turn. The smile turned to an expression of shock before the killer dropped the camera. Sounds of screaming overtook, and I could hear my Discord notifications going wild, but I didn't stop to check them. I couldn't tear myself away from the screen. The screaming ended promptly, and the camera shook as it was lifted to focus on the body of the cameraman, still clad in his balaclava, but now lying face up on the rock pools. I wish I could say he suffered like the girl did, but he was certainly dead. Most alarmingly, his entire face was covered with small, baby crabs, nipping away at chunks of the mask, flesh, and then raw skin. I felt sick, fought back the bile, and pushed my computer chair about a foot back from the screen. The camera turned around once more to face the new videographer. She was just as beautiful as before, despite her dark waves being a little distressed. Parts of her squished eye were smeared around the socket, and inside it were more of the tiny little crabs. They weren't consuming her the same way as they were her killer, just decorating her face. She smiled a wide, unnatural smile and spoke. "You should have tried to help me instead of just watching. I'll see you soon." Then it went black. I tried to steady myself a little. I'd seen what probably amounted to thousands of creepy and dark videos on the web, but never anything like that. Everything I'd seen before still had a grain of skepticism about it, but something about what I'd just seen had felt so real. I wondered if it had been a live feed. If it had, was she really addressing me? It felt like she had. I lifted my phone to check the notifications and see what the others were saying about it. There were a ton of messages, mostly expressing pure shock and confusion, quite a few insisting it couldn't be real. The only one that stood out to me was a single message from Loiters with Intent.
This video was part of a live stream on the deep web, as the result of an auction held by a hitman. The winning bidder chose the girl from the party and the murder weapon. Rumors on these forums state that every viewer of the original stream found themselves drawn to the beach and disappeared mysteriously not long after watching. I never clicked play, but I knew you fuckers would. Prove it, real friends. Beware the crab woman.
His message had made most of them laugh. They couldn't get over the ridiculousness of the crab woman. And in all honesty, every single one of us were desensitized to that shit. Some more than others. Monsters and creature features were something of a joke in our community, a subgenre to be mocked. A few of them even praised the video's production values, asking if Loiter said any more, but hours passed and no new messages from him appeared. I didn't say anything else either. Something about the video made everything we were interested in seem dirty and sinister somehow. I couldn't get that beautiful girl out of my mind, the sheer terror in her eyes at the start. Even if it were fake, those eyes would haunt my dreams. I thought about what Loiters had said too, and to be honest, living by the sea made me nervous. As far as I knew, none of my anonymous friends lived this close to the ocean. They could joke about an urban legend that suggested they would end up on the beach dead without any real consequence. I was creeped out, and for me, it was a little close to home. So I did what I could to push it out of my mind. I spent a few days watching Disney movies and browsing much fluffier places on the internet. I muted my Discord notifications. I didn't want to talk about creepy shit for a while. It encouraged me to get out, and I started to take daily runs, attempting to improve my fitness, in the hope I could maybe make some in real life friends. Thankfully, it worked. It had been weeks since I thought about the girl, the man in the balaclava, and the horde of tiny crabs that ate them both. Loiters with intent and his freaky message had been all but forgotten. Until a few hours ago. I left for my run today, just like always. I ran along the cliff top and past the bandstand. I don't know at what point I climbed down the stairs to the beach, but I did. I found myself there, exhausted. I did what any human does, and I tried to rationalize it in my head. The beach didn't look like the one in the video. It wasn't a vast expanse, and there were other people on it. There were steps to the left and a slope to the right. I convinced myself that my forgotten journey was my mind playing tricks on me. The video had bothered me so much that I'd ended up at the beach as some sort of sick subconscious joke. That's when I started typing this out. I thought maybe if I processed what I saw, I would be able to get over it. It was therapeutic at first, sitting here in the sea air, typing out my experience, cathartic even. But the last time I looked up, I realized that something was seriously wrong. There aren't any steps to the left anymore, or slope to the right. The cliff top has all but disappeared, and all I can see for miles is sand. The people have gone too. All but one, that is. I'm sure I can see a girl sitting on the rock pools.